Vega 56 had a troubled history. Depending on the crypto trends and competitive landscape, it bounced between extremely competitive and extremely overpriced, or out of stock, the latter often triggering the former. One thing that we never wavered with, though, was how fun it was to tune Vega 56. It's the equivalent of a project car. You buy it to have fun on the weekends, build upon a strong foundation with clear shortcomings, and make something better. That's why we liked Vega 56. When we asked AMD if PowerPlay table modding would still work with Navi RX 5700 XT cards, we were told, quote, "Unfortunately, you're going to have to find new tricks," which was hugely disappointing. Turns out we actually didn't. Igor from Igor's lab, a peer whom we hold in high regard, recently published his new PowerPlay tables that, lo and behold, do actually work. We now have a 5700 XT with a makeshift cooler we threw onto it, and we're trying to cut costs from a full water cooling approach by going for one of our hybrid mods instead. No open loop required here, just a big power supply, a liquid cooler, and a registry hack. Before that, this video is brought to you by us and the GN Store. The best way to support our independent reporting is through store.gamersnexus.net. This is made possible with your purchases of merch like our GN Medium mod mat, in stock and shipping now and designed with GPU teardown diagrams and grids. Our 100% custom-made two-tone shirt is also a great way to help, and it's currently on sale. The shirt uses 95% cotton and 5% elastane for a sporty fit with vibrant colors and was designed entirely by the GN team. Learn more at the link in the description below or go to store.gamersnexus.net. So these hybrid mods and the PowerPlay table mods that we do, they're pretty common at this point. We've done them on Vega 56. We've done hybrid mods all the way back to probably 9 or 10 series for the first ones we did. And that's just us. Obviously, it's been in the industry for a lot longer than that. It's a good way to not go full open loop, and you can buy something relatively cheap, like this kit. We're using an old Arctic kit. Turns out, we're not sure if all of them fit, but at least this one, this is the version 3 of their hybrid cooler, whatever they call it. It's a 140 millimeter CLC. It's got an okay fan on it. It's not great. And it's just an Asetek pump, and then some standoffs and 3 different screw holes. And one of those does happen to line up with Navi, which is great. That means that you can buy what is now old inventory for relatively cheap. Hopefully it's still cheap at the time this video goes up, and throw it onto a card, and you have something that is significantly better cooled. VRM cooling, memory cooling, you can throw their heat sinks on if you want. They come with some small heat sinks for it, but we just did a fan directly pointed at it, and that's enough. So anyway, it's a fairly cheap way to water cool a card without going full open loop. You don't have to buy a custom block. You don't have to get a pump, res, run tubing, all that stuff. If you're doing open loop anyway, cool. It's going to be way better. But if you don't want to, and you want to just hack something together like we do, like I said, project car, except this is, in this instance, it's one that you go for performance, not for looks, then this is the approach you could take. So back to Igor's content. Igor used to work for Tom's Hardware Germany. He has branched off into his own thing now called Igor's Lab, and we like his content a lot. He does good work. It's all in German for the most part, but Google Translate's good these days. So he published his PowerPlay tables. For the most part, he saw about the same results we're going to show here today, but it'll just back up some of his data. Then we collected a bit of extra data as well with our specific approach. So instead of going open loop, like I said, we want this hybrid approach, and it's relatively affordable. It's kind of fun, and it's very hacky. So anyway, the max gains are not tremendous, but we did apply the PowerPlay table that gives you up to 90% power offset. PowerPlay table, what that means is it's basically a registry hack. So you have to go into a specific registry key and locate the video card. If you have multiple in there from previous installations, it's a bit trickier. Or if you don't have any in there, it's a new install of Windows, you just bought the card, all you do is double click the registry key, run it, and then it's hacked. So that gave us a 90% maximum power offset. It does work, it draws more power, so that was easy to validate, and we'll show that chart later. And then for the rest, it's just a matter of playing with the volt frequency table until stuff works. So, and we're going to talk about that a lot too today. Anyway, the biggest problem with doing anything like this, specifically and almost exclusively for AMD cards, is that nobody really understands any of the numbers they think they're setting or reading about online. So you have to validate performance after you apply an overclock. You have to. It doesn't count if the number looks higher, but the performance is worse. Further, AMD's set frequency is different from the get frequency. You might set 2200, but in return get 2120. This means that in order to actually know what the frequency is that you've achieved, you have to log the frequency rather than just look at the number that was typed in, because that's not what the new clock actually is. This becomes frustrating because a lot of people like to comment on how they're hitting frequencies that they simply aren't. If you type in 2200, it doesn't mean you're getting 2200. You might be getting in the range of 21 to maybe 2120, 2130, something like that. But ultimately, validate with performance. And we're going to demonstrate why in the first chart we have coming up. And we'll talk about this more in the conclusion section. As illustrated, our best result was a 2160 set score and 900 set memory for Sniper Elite. We ran 2165 for the rest of the games and saw good performance, but it didn't work out that way with Sniper. Our memory would not clock past 905, and that extra 5 megahertz was starting to trigger some instability. Because of memory straps and delta clock challenges, we decided to try a few different memory offsets, like 940, 960, and 975, to see if any of them would hit a more stable landing while still offering performance. Sometimes a higher number will decrease relative performance or introduce crashing, but if you shoot beyond that and hit a new stable landing, it'll end up better. That didn't work out here, unfortunately, but it's something that we talked about with Kingpin in our recent stream with Jay. Our 2180 set frequency netted a 57.9 FPS average and a hell of a lot of tearing and stuttering, which is why you're seeing those degraded values for 1% and 0.1% lows. The 2150 set was stable and fluid, but there was still room to improve, although it was an improvement on its own. The 2165 set actually started receding performance to below a stock 5700 XT level, which would cut off at 71 FPS average, and the 2170 set frequency did the same. Lows looked okay in this one, but performance was actually worse. Again, you have to validate overclocks with performance. Failing to do so means that you'll pretty easily make things worse while the numbers look higher in the settings or in the applications that handle your overclocking. But what's important is looking at the actual frequency that's coming out of it, not just the one that you type in, and also looking at the performance, because the frequency might report higher, but it doesn't mean that it's actually better. Sniper Elite 4 will start us out. Depending on the architecture, this game can sometimes show larger deltas from clock changes than some of the other titles, so we'll begin here. It's DirectX 12 and asynchronous compute enabled, making it a good candidate for modern hardware benchmarking. The RX 5700 XT stock card operated at 71 FPS average for Sniper Elite 4, with the lows at 63.6 FPS 1% and 62.9 FPS 0.1%. As a reminder, these numbers are a representation of frame times as converted into FPS. It's a bit of an abstraction away from the base metric of time, but it's still a clearer representation of frame fluidity than pure average FPS, which obfuscates some of the data range. The 5700 XT with a plus 50% power offset and a 25 MHz overclock on the memory, which we did for the review initially, ended up at 75 FPS average. That allowed it a gain of 6.2% over the stock card, which is one of the biggest ones we'll see for today's testing, from stock to overclocked. This is a meaningful jump and largely attributable to the memory overclock, although the extra power also eliminated clock throttling contingent upon the power constraints as usual. With a hybrid mod and an overclock, we ended up at 78.3 FPS average for a gain of 10% over the stock RX 5700 XT, in line with Igor's results in his initial publication of the PowerPlay tables, although our gain shrinks to just 3.8% when considering the overclocked 5700 XT from our original testing. And that was without any actual manual core overclocking. Comparatively, the RTX 2070 Super ran at 79 FPS average, now functionally tying with the 5700 XT Hybrid OC, and the 2070 Super maintained a lead at 86 FPS average, or about 9% ahead of the 5700 XT Hybrid OC when it was also overclocked. If you're curious whether just adding the cooler helped performance, the answer, sadly, is no. The 5700 XT Hybrid stock testing ran at 71 FPS average, with the average and lows all within error of the original stock run. F1 2018 is next, a DirectX 11 title to give some perspective. At 1080p, the 5700 XT original card operated at 150.3 FPS average with strong frame time performance and consistency. The 5700 XT at plus 50% power and 900 MHz memory did 155 FPS average, a jaunt of about 3%. The Hybrid OC moved to 158 FPS average for a gain of 2% over the 5700 XT at plus 50% power. We're in Radeon 7 territory now, so it's becoming clear why Radeon 7 has been killed off. As for the non-overclocked hybrid mod, there aren't any gains to speak of. Its 150.8 FPS average is within error of the 150.3 FPS average of the original test run, so simply replacing the cooler did not help our results outside of reducing the noise levels, obviously. At 1440p, the 5700 XT ran at 115 FPS average stock, improved to 119.5 FPS average with a plus 50% overclock, well, for power target anyway, and improved to 122.6 FPS average with the hybrid OC. The jump is 6.7% from stock 114.9 FPS to hybrid OC 122.6 FPS average, or about 2.6% higher than the original overclock. Looking to NVIDIA for comparison, the new data puts the 5700 XT hybrid OC as roughly equal with the 2070 Super in average frame rate. The 2080 maintains a firm lead in this particular title at 8.2% ahead of the 5700 XT hybrid overclock, although we don't really recommend the 2080 unless there's a good discount at this point. The stock clocked hybrid mod at 115.5 FPS average is within error margins of the 5700 XT original test at 114.9 FPS average, repeating the previous result. At 4K, the 5700 XT stock card ran at 68.9 FPS average. The 5700 XT at plus 50% power improved by 1.3% to 69.8 FPS average, and then the 5700 XT hybrid OC launched to 75.1 FPS average, an improvement of 9% over the stock 5700 XT result, and about 7.6% over the 5700 XT plus 50% power result. That's not bad. It's not really what we wanted to see, but it's not bad. It's unfortunate that our memory was limited so hard, because that's where we could have gotten some real gains, especially with the PowerPlay tables that boost the amount you're allowed to overclock the memory. Comparatively, the 2070 Super ended up at 73.6 FPS average when stock, allowing the 5700 XT hybrid OC a slight lead in averages and a meaningful lead in lows, while the overclocked 2070 Super manages to keep averages ahead, but still has comparatively inconsistent frame time performance. The stock clocked hybrid and its 68.2 FPS average is, once again, within error margins of the 5700 XT blower card when allowed to run at stock fan speeds, although we would improve our performance at a given lower noise level. Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1080p is next. Using the Crystal Engine and DirectX 12, the RX 5700 XT stock card completed this test at 124 FPS average, with the 5700 XT overclock at 126.5 FPS average, increasing performance by 2.2% once again. The hybrid OC ended up at 129 FPS average, which placed it tied with the GTX 1080 Ti FTW3, albeit with marginally worse 0.1% lows. This also surpasses the Super, but the Super with a normal overclock still leads at 134 FPS average, a gap of 4.2% over the 5700 XT. The 2080 maintains its modern irrelevance with only a slight lead over the overclocked 2070 Super. 1440p has the 5700 XT stock card at 84.5 FPS average, the original plus 50% power and 25 MHz memory overclock at 86.9 FPS, a 2.8% gain, and the 5700 XT hybrid OC at 88.8 FPS average. The hybrid OC gets us 2.2% more performance than the original overclock and 5.1% more performance than stock. Compared to the 2070 Super, the hybrid OC ended up roughly tied after the effort, with the 2070 Super overclock ending up in a lead of 8.2% over the 5700 XT hybrid OC. At 4K, the RX 5700 XT stock card ran at 47 FPS average originally, improved to 49 FPS average in the original review with just a plus 50% power target and 25 MHz memory overclock, and then the hybrid OC jumped again to 50.6 FPS average. The total gain is 2.8% over the original overclock and 7.4% over the stock result. Comparatively, where the 2070 Super was roughly tied with the 5700 XT originally, and was tied with the 5700 XT with a basic increase in power allowance, the hybrid OC ends up, well, also roughly tied. It's just on the other side of the 2070 Super now. The 2070 Super OC maintains a lead at 55 FPS average, or about 7.7% ahead of the RX 5700 XT hybrid OC. Far Cry 5 is next, a DirectX 11 game that is AMD sponsored. Far Cry 5 at 1440p had the original RX 5700 XT at 95 FPS average, the plus 50% power OC at 98.8 FPS average, and the hybrid OC at 102 FPS average. 1% and 0.1% lows are roughly the same for all results, which is good, because that means our overclock isn't so aggressive that it's degrading the performance. That sometimes causes average FPS to increase, but you'd see a 1% low decrease. The gain of the hybrid OC is 3.1% over the 5700 XT plus 50% power, or about 7% over the stock 5700 XT performance from the original cooler review. 1440p positioned the 2070 Super as behind the 5700 XT Hybrid OC, ranked at 99.5 FPS average to 102, for a 5700 XT Hybrid OC lead of 2.4%. At 4K with Far Cry 5, the RX 5700 XT stock card placed at 53 FPS average, with the 5700 XT at plus 50% at 55.8 FPS average, and then the Hybrid OC ended up at 57.4 FPS average. The gain is about 2.9% over the 5700 XT at plus 50% power, which is in line with Igor's earlier mentioned results, versus the stock result. This gain is about 8.7% with these settings. Compared to the 2070 Super, which ran at 55 FPS average, the 5700 XT Hybrid OC managed a lead of 57.4 FPS average, or 3.6% ahead of the stock 2070 Super. Overclocking the 2070 Super allows it to once again leapfrog the XT Hybrid OC, but the two are more or less equivalent at this point. At 1080p, Far Cry 5 did not seem to show any uplift in our testing. The hybrid stock results are the same as the original stock results, both within 125 FPS range, and the overclocked results are functionally tied as well. We're hitting some other limit or issue here. Strange Brigade with DirectX 12 is next. We often test Vulkan for this one as well, but AMD actually does its best with DX12 in this game, and because we're just comparing the 5700 XT to itself, we'll focus on just DX12 today. At 4K, the 5700 XT stock card ran at 71.6 FPS average, which was improved to 74 FPS with the original plus 50% power. The hybrid OC put us at 75.4 FPS average, an overall increase from baseline of 5.3%. That's one of the least exciting we've seen so far, but it's improvement nonetheless, sort of. Versus the 50% power offset, our gain is 1.6% only. Technically, the 5700 XT Hybrid OC now looks to lead the 2070 Super by 1 FPS, but we are within error margins on run-to-run variance here. The two are functionally tied. Overclocking the 2070 Super gets it to 80 FPS average for another single-digit performance gain. At 1440p, the RX 5700 XT stock card ran at 123.8 FPS average, and plus 50% power put it up to 128 FPS average for a gain of 3.6%. The hybrid OC mod had us up to 130.3 FPS average, or 5.2% improved over baseline. Not exciting at all, but also not bad. This chart shows TimeSpy graphics results as sorted by the parent score, which is hidden from the chart as it blow out the scale. Graphics 1 is more core intensive, while Graphics 2 is memory intensive, so this allows us a unique look at where the card is tackling its shortcomings once modified. The stock 5700 XT placed at 60 FPS average for GT1 for the score and 48.6 FPS GT2 score. In our initial review, we noted that the plus 50% power offset and plus 25 MHz memory overclock is what boosted this card to 50.1 GT2 from 48.6 GT2. Remember, TimeSpy is much more sensitive than a game, so a single FPS increase, 1, is already a big deal in this benchmark. The card was choking on memory here. Going from this result to the hybrid OC result, we jumped to 66 FPS GT1 and 53.3 FPS GT2, both of which are tremendous gains and are built on the back of a higher core clock with more power allowance. Although it obviously wasn't reflected as cleanly in every game, this puts the 5700 XT hybrid OC up with the 1080 Ti, whereas it was previously stuck near the 2060 Super. One more note, the 1080 Ti has a much higher GT2 score, so its ranking, the higher ranking, is derived from this rather than from the lower core value. GT2 is worth more points in the weighted score, and the 1080 Ti's massive lead here is an indication that Navi still does have some memory starvation limits that could be potentially resolved with higher memory clocks. Our next chart will show thermals under steady state conditions. So this is after half an hour of burn-in, where all the temperatures have leveled out and equalized. As you can see in our B-roll, the setup was swapped between either a Nox with 3000 RPM fan, which is a bit insane really, or the stock fan for the radiator, with the other being used to cool the VRM and memory modules at close proximity to the card. This is where, in a normal case, a bottom intake would do pretty well, or a side intake, but those are rare these days. The hybrid card ran a GPU junction hotspot temperature of 86 degrees, or 66 degrees for the edge temperature. Remember that junction temperature on these newer AMD cards means it's the hottest of all the sensors on the die, whereas the edge temperature is the one that you're more used to seeing from NVIDIA or from older AMD cards. The stock blower cooler operated at 98 degrees Celsius under the same workload, with the 40 dBA test not shown here at just over 100 degrees Celsius. We swapped to the 3000 RPM fan for some of our overclocking benchmarks just because the 140mm radiator was pretty limiting, and that allowed us to run at 84 degrees junction temperature under the overclocked and overpowered configuration. This isn't linearly comparable to the other hybrid number on the screen because we changed the fan, but that was kind of the point. We changed the fan because we needed more cooling power. Considering that this is lower than our stock hybrid performance with the original Arctic fan, we were doing pretty well for just a 140 CLC with an overclock with a lot of extra power going through the GPU. Either way, we've dropped over 10 degrees off the hotspot thermals from the changes away from the original cooler. As for the VRM and memory, for anyone concerned that ditching the VRM heatsink actually matters, it really doesn't, as long as you have direct airflow onto the card. No heatsinks are needed. You don't need a 3000 RPM fan for this either. It's kind of exaggerated, but ultimately, the voltage regulator module that AMD built for the card is good enough that it's easy to cool with direct airflow out of a reasonable fan, maybe 1000 to 1300 RPM, assuming the case airflow is also not bad. Memory, however, is a different story. Under stock conditions, our GDDR6 temperatures are actually pretty good. They're better than the stock blower cooler with this relatively lightweight 3D Mark workload, as opposed to the torture workload we normally use. And the overclocked hybrid did begin to struggle a bit. That's because we pushed the memory harder, we pushed the power, and then we pulled the Noctua fan away from the card and put on the radiator instead. So that was obviously a pretty big blow to the performance on the components on the card. In this instance, the VRM is still doing well, but the memory could benefit from a heatsink, and Arctic does include one with this kit. So you could stick some of those on. You would still need a fan nearby. Just putting the heatsink on isn't going to be enough. GDDR6 runs hot. This kit was made back in the GTX 500 series, so you do need more than just the heatsink. For reference, the original blower design was also hitting similar thermals under torture scenarios from those other charts, but we obviously prefer to see better out of a hybrid solution, and you can get better without too much effort. Our last chart is for power. This is measured directly at the 12-volt rails for the PCIe slot and the PCIe cables, so we get a direct and accurate feed on power measurements. The original 5700 XT consumed 217 watts during Furmark workloads, or about 210 to 216 under time spy extreme conditions that are similar to gaming workloads. Increasing power target by 50% did almost exactly that, expanding to 335 watts Furmark and 280 to 290 time spy extreme. This is all expected and part of stock behavior of the card, jumping to 90% power offset increase. That is, didn't change things much, but it moved us to 372 watts from 335 watts for total card power, ignoring the 3.3 volt rail that accounts for a couple of extra watts, and then we were at 300 watts for time spy extreme GT1. It's not insanely power hungry, but it's certainly high. It's up there when considering the performance. In most instances, we were between a 2070 Super and a 2070 Super overclocked, which draw between about 214 and 265 watts respectively. The hybrid mod with PowerPlay table changes we did is far beyond that power consumption and it's similar performance. So it's not efficient, but it's a brute force way to kind of get to that performance level. So that's the hybrid mod. Not huge gains, sometimes pretty small, like 5% or something. And then other times we're at or approaching 10% for the gains. It just depends on the game. And this is, like I said, the reason we did this with Vega 56 was because it was fun. It's not because it's practical. It's not practical. And we also have to state that, although some people in the enthusiast community don't like when I say this, we do have to state you need to be a little careful with these types of mods because it is exiting the spec. And I've seen forum posts online where people discuss our content and they're happy to see it because not a lot of people do the PowerPlay stuff. But then at the same time, we'll get people who say, but I don't like that GN is saying be careful because it's a lot of power. Well, I mean, I hear you. The card will probably be fine. But realistically, we can't know that. And it's out of spec. And you're pushing a lot more power through it. Can the VRM handle it? Yes. But there's a few things we don't know. We don't know how well the end user replicated this. We don't know if the end user looked at this and said, oh, I actually don't need any cooling on the memory. Because you could look at that and think that. And so there's a chance that someone messes up their card. And so because of that, we do have to say, be careful with these mods. It does apply, it pushes more power through the GPU. It's a bit fun. You can get more overclocking out of it without going too crazy. You don't need an all-in-2 pot, although that's an option. And you can throw a water cooler on it and get pretty far. But just daily use, even Igor on his site says something along the lines of don't run it too hard 24/7 with maximum power throughput and maximum voltage because we don't know what that does to longevity. We really don't. We can predict that it might not do a lot because the VRM is pretty good, capacitor quality is pretty good, but at the end of the day, until people run these things for years, at which point it becomes irrelevant, it's hard to know exactly what it does. So you'll probably be fine, but wanted to put that disclaimer out there because people just, you know, they copy something like it's a guide, and then it's possible that it goes poorly. So get direct cooling on the memory, get direct cooling on the VRM. Heat sinks won't hurt, but they're not. The more important thing is direct fans, and don't expect the world from this. We tried pretty hard. People, whenever we overclock AMD specifically, people like to comment and say, why is GN overclocking AMD worse than NVIDIA? Well, we're really not. We're doing what we can. And our limit happened to be about 2160 to 2165. We could technically type in the number 2200. We could technically type in the number 2180. But performance either degrades or you start getting this really sporadic frequency behavior where it doesn't necessarily show up in logging, but it shows up in data. And so frame pacing just goes out the window. So yeah, we tried everything between roughly 2150 and about 2200, and we settled around 2160, 2165, depending on the game, for the for the set number. And then the get was a bit lower than that, obviously. And then the memory is the most important. We were stable at 900, couldn't do any more than that. So that was the biggest disappointment. Hopefully you get better memory on your card. But Igor's mod does unlock up to 1000 megahertz number you can type in for the memory. You won't get it probably, but you can try and hopefully get better than us. So that's it. That'll cap the coverage. Thank you for watching. Thank you for the interest in this. And not tremendous gains, but fun enough. So subscribe for more. Go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out directly, or store.gamersnexus.net if you'd like to pick up one of our mod mats like this one, or one of our toolkits. And I'll see you all next time.